Recording. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, everybody, thanks so much for joining us. I'm so pleased, so honored. I can't begin to tell you, to be able to have the opportunity to interview Dr. Pettit. I should start at the beginning of 1985 when we met at the Training Institute in Florida. And it was the same year that I met Sid Banks and I heard Sid speak for the first time. And I had a huge reaction. Basically, I wept. I didn't know what I was weeping about. It was after the fact. I mean, I had never had a reaction like this ever in my life. And it was after the fact that I realized that I had felt this enormous sense of relief, that it's not up to me to run my life and make the life of my dreams happen. This is how I was growing up, to think that it was all on me. So I don't know what Sid said, but I can tell you this, I would probably not be here today. Not that I would have committed suicide, although who knows, but I would not be doing this webinar with Dr. Pettit if it was not for him. You know how you have a lot of respect for people in life, and I needed to respect people who were hearing something from Sid for me to stick around and really hear more and more. And so I owe so much to Dr. Pettit. And he was also the really inspired me to share with my clients that reading and listening to Sydney Banks makes a big difference. If I had not heard Dr. Pettit say, read every one of Sid's books at least twice, I would have not done that myself. And my second reading of Second Chance was so completely different. My first reading, I thought, well, that's a nice story. That's an interesting story. Mm-hmm. But I had no idea what was there. So I started telling my clients, you ought to read and listen to Sid Banks. And I shared the website with them. And those who did follow my suggestion, I could see a definite difference in how they approached life. Is, you know, the easiest way I could explain that. And that grew into mystery school, so that people have a place to get together, gather, and talk about the insights they're having in reading and listening to Sid Banks. And I'm just going to give you a very brief synopsis. Bill has a long list of past accomplishments, but for the purpose of this, I'm just going to say what he's doing currently, which is, he's finally retired, retired psychiatrist, a 3 principles-based mental health educator, adjunct clinical professor at Creighton University School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry. And he currently runs a number of online courses that I really recommend. I've been able to be in a few of them, and they're just so helpful, so useful. So I think, you know, there's so much more to say, but I just want to say that, you know, it's really a privilege to be able to share Dr. Pettit with all of you. And at the end, we'll have time for any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. And I'm fine on, if you want to do this through interview, or if you want me just to talk for, do we have 60 minutes, 75 minutes? What do we have total?
We have at least 60 minutes, and I'll stay on longer if you have time, but we have 60.
Yeah, we can aim for 75 if you want to, so people know that we, you know, that's fine with me if you have. So I didn't know whether you wanted to kind of ask me questions, or what you know, what would you like?
I would personally love to hear, how did you realize that what Sid Banks was talking about was so meaningful and so profound and so helpful for psychiatry and psychology?
Okay. Well, many have probably heard this, but for those that haven't, in 1980, I had moved to I was the chief of psychiatry at the nuclear submarine base in Groton, Connecticut. I had been there in the Navy for 9 years after being drafted. I spent 3 years as a Navy flight surgeon for a squadron of Navy pilots, and was a family physician for the pilots. And during that time, I had, before that, I'd spent 2 years in surgery residency, working 108 hours a week, 36 on, 12 off, and twice a month being on call 96 out of 108 hours, if you can imagine. I remember lying down one time for 45 minutes twice during a 60-hour period in a 900-bed teaching hospital, doing surgery and stuff from people from the emergency room. And after a year and a half, I just was exhausted. And I told my late wife, Sue, who passed away in 2000, we'd been married 31 years, that I just couldn't do it another 3.5 years. I just couldn't do that. And I wasn't being nice to people. I wasn't being nice, especially to the nurses. If they woke me up when I finally had a chance to rest for 30 minutes and they called me and they didn't have the urine output or whatever I needed to make a decision as far as orders, I said not nice things to them. And so and even my colleagues, I wasn't nice to. And I don't ever remember not being nice to a patient. I think that's the last thing that goes for a doctor. But I didn't like the way I was. I didn't like living in a chronically exhausted state. And so I put in my 6 months ahead of time to give them a chance to fill that surgery billet. And they did, because it was a very fairly prestigious program. By the way, some of you know this, but does anybody, Lori, I'll just ask you, put you on the spot. Do you know who Benjamin Rush is?
No.
Benjamin Rush was the only physician who signed the American Declaration of Independence. So Rush University, or Rush Medical School, was named after Dr. Benjamin Rush. And that's where I was at Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's, which is now Rush University in Chicago. So I had been deferred by the Navy. We still were obligated for 2 years of military service back then. And I had been deferred for 5 years of general surgery residency, after which I was going to go back and do 2 years of cardiovascular surgery to be a heart surgeon. In some ways, I've become a heart surgeon, but of the spirit, if you will. No blood involved, which is nice. So within 2 weeks, I got a letter from Uncle Sam saying, "Come on down. We heard you're no longer deferred." So I volunteered to take 6 months of extra schooling and to be trained to be a doctor on an aircraft carrier. It included 3 months of flight training, actually. So you remember Officer and a Gentleman? Anybody? Yeah, that was the first. I almost drowned in that thing called the Dilbert Dunker. The guy, I couldn't find the thing to get out from under the water, and the guy that was under the water, the diver, was like, "You think I'm going to be there when your plane crashes?" And finally, when I let out and started drowning, taking in water, then he very quickly got me to the surface. And I had a choice then to either quit or to get back in line. And I was silly enough to get back in line. And so I did it the third time. The second time I did it, but they said I didn't do it well enough. Anyway, so then I went to be a family doctor, and I saw how much people's mental state affects their physical state. Sid talked about how these principles are an attempt to explain the connection between our spiritual nature and our psychological nature. But I would even add it's the connection between our spiritual nature and our psychological nature and our physical nature, because you can't separate them. We're in form, and our state of mind moment to moment affects all 50 trillion cells in our body, every one of them. And I started to see that in a rudimentary way, that our state of stress or lack of it, the activation of the stress response, took its toll on people, both psychologically and physically and spiritually, eventually. And so I got interested in psychiatry, and had been going in and out of depression myself for a number of years. And I did my residency in psychiatry, and then I was chief of psychiatry of the nuclear submarine base. And after 9 years, I made the difficult decision to leave, because I had a lot of good friends, and I enjoyed the work that I was doing and helping people. And yet I got out, and I became a trainer for a thing called LifeSpring, which was kind of like EST and the forum. It was as Avis is to Hertz, it was to EST, and had been founded by two people who had worked together at a thing called Life Dynamics. And that's where I was. I was in Marin County, California, doing trainings in New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Denver, Phoenix, San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco. I did one in Tokyo, Japan, Calgary, Canada. And my secretary, my administrative assistant, when I became national program director for the entire company, she told me one day that there was this psychologist that she was seeing named George Pransky, and that he was really helping her. And then one day she said, he's heard about you, and he'd like you to come to his open house on January 1st, 1983. I said, okay. So I asked my wife if she would come with me. And in the meantime, I saw that the owner of our company had put a sign up that said, anybody who went to see George Pransky on Friday nights at Berkeley at the University of California would lose their job. I became very interested then. So I went to see George on New Year's Day, and we became friends, and I knew we were going to be friends forever, which we are. And soon after, I started going to his meetings on Friday evening over in Berkeley. And within about 6 weeks, 6 or 8 weeks, actually, the president of the company then went with me out to Coral Gables, Florida, to the Advanced Human Studies Institute for the week-long program with Dr. Roger Mills and Rick Suarez and Kimberly Cadu. And I think I had already put in my resignation, and he wanted to see what I was resigning for, So that's how I met. But so on April Fool's Day, 1983, Sid Banks was coming to San Francisco for a weekend, a Friday evening and a Saturday and a Sunday. And I went there that Friday night, and some of you might know Billy Hutcherson, who's a very dear friend of mine. Well, Billy, I met him because he sat in the seat next to me that day on April Fool's Day, 1983. And with both of us for the first time, listened to Sydney Banks. I had been going in and out of clinical depression for about 20 years. I'd never been hospitalized. I'd been on medicine a few times for a little bit, a while, but it didn't seem to help. But I would get to the point where I was almost immobilized. Now, I saw 6 different psychiatrists, and they were good people. Let me say that clearly. They were good people who cared. And they helped me through the periods of depression by their support and their caring. I never had to stop medical school. I never had to stop college. I never had to stop my psychiatry residency. So I'm very grateful to them. In fact, one of them that helped me through medical school later was a psychiatrist in Dr. Rita Shuford's clinic in Oregon. It's a small world, right? And he helped me through my senior year when I almost got immobilized. But I sat there, I still had been struggling with depression for over 20 years. And I thought it was because of my heredity. I thought it was because of my genes. I thought it was because of all these other things. My parents weren't bad people. They were good people. They were loving people, but they had limited understanding. And I sat with listening to Mr. Banks, and within 30 minutes, I didn't weep, but I would say within 30 minutes, about 250 pounds came off my shoulders and chest. And for the first time in my life, I saw who was causing my depression. I saw that he was innocent, but I found the culprit. And it wasn't the butler in the library with the rope. It was Bill Pettit with his thinking. 6 to 9 hours a day, metaphorically, I saw that I had been doing this for at least 20 years. And then wondering at the end of the day why I had this terrible headache on that side of my head. Boy, if I could only find what was causing that. Now, I'm here to tell you that I didn't immediately see how to stop doing that. I didn't. But I'll tell you what a relief it was to see that I was the cause of it, 6 to 9 hours a day of misusing this powerful, beautiful, incredible gift of thought. Because I thought it was my depression had being caused by other people, circumstances, genes, heredity, quote, stressors out there. No, I saw that I had been doing it innocently and with lack of sufficient understanding of how life works. You know, what Mr. Banks said, and we had many talks, he was my mentor for 26 years. And I think he, you know, I don't know if I wouldn't call it special, but he did pay attention to me because I was the first real psychiatrist. Gordon Trockman, who was IQ is probably about 40 to 50 points higher than mine, was the other psychiatrist at the time, trained at Yale, Harvard, and Johns Hopkins. But there was something about it that I got a lot of attention, and I started to see. I started to say something that Sid would say, and it'll probably come back to me unless you remember what I was talking about. But I started to see that it wasn't that I had thought for all those years that my depression was caused by other people, places, and things over which I had zero control. So I was screwed. I mean, even when I wasn't depressed, depression was like a dark cloud that hovered a couple of feet behind me and a couple of feet higher than my head. And if it had a voice, it would say, Pettit, remember, I can have your ass any time I want it. So don't get cocky, because then I'll have your butt for a number of weeks or months. So I lived in fear. Now, one of the things that isn't talked about much in the principles is the fact that it's offended some people from a religious standpoint, people really religious people. In fact, to the point that in 2001, we were going to have a conference in Pittsburgh. We were going to have a conference in Morgantown, and there were actually death threats made to Judy Sedgman and to Sid Banks. And the people at the university said, we can't guarantee that we can protect you. So we moved it to Pittsburgh, and with other security reasons, they were able to say, we've got you. Well, and what hasn't been dealt with, well, why would people say this is a depression, is a religion? I'll tell you why it isn't a religion first, and then I'll tell you why I could see that why people get confused. It's not a religion because there's no rituals or dogma. There's no there's no dogma, and there's no rituals. If you see what Sid saw, if you see it as he pointed to it, you see it for yourself. Like Sid always said, please don't believe anything that I say because I said it. Now, I don't know any religious leader that I've ever heard that said that. It was usually, this is the way it is, and this is the way you believe, and if you're going to join. So number one, Sid made it very clear, please don't believe anything I say. And he would always make it clear, it's not that I'm going to try to deceive you, but if you believe what I say because I said it, you've given up your freedom to think for yourself. Please don't do that. Don't do that. Again, I don't know any religious leader that would say that. And then he said, but if you're a good listener, if you're open and your heart's open and you listen and you hear something that touches that place of truth inside of you, where you see it for yourself, and you go, wow, that's true. Once that's happened, it's yours. It's because you saw it for yourself, not because I said it. So, and he said, please don't ever try to teach things that aren't true for you. Don't try to teach what you think George Pransky or Elsie Spittle or Bill Pettit or whoever, or Mark Howard or Dick and Bencher. Well, I heard them say it. I heard him say, no. He says, you teach from what is true for you. Because a lot of people just need a tap on the shoulder. Because why? Because it's inside of us already. It's at our essence. It's not, educere, to educate, means to draw out. Educere means to draw out. Well, you can't draw out water from a well unless there's water in the well. You can't draw out what isn't already there. And that's crucial. So why do people even think then that's a religion? Why? Because it is a theology. You won't hear many people in the three principles maybe saying that, but I'll say it, because what's a theology? It's a study of God, the Greek roots. Well, what Sid said, and he told me this many times when he really had this experience, when he was enveloped by the white light and the buzzing sound, he said to his wife, Barbara, he said, I've seen what people call God is, and I've seen what life is, and I've seen how the two are connected. Wow. Wow. I've seen what people call God is, I've seen what life is, and I've seen how the two are connected. And then he said to his wife, Barbara, he said, do you know what this means? Now you can imagine his wife who's sitting there with her husband who's on a week holiday from his welding job. And he's going back on Monday at the pulp mill where he's been for 14 years. And he's saying, he's seen what people call God is, he's seen what life is, and he's seen how the two are connected. And he's asking me, do you know what this means? And then but she said his face, his eyes were so clear, and there was a calm about him that I'd never seen in another human being. And even though the words were scary, there was something about his presence that was reassuring. And she was able to say, Sid, what does this mean? And he said, well, at least three things, by the way, all of which became true. Number one, he said, I'm going to be writing books. Get a ninth grade education. He told me many times, after that school, I have read 3 books. They were welding books. He said, people will say that I've read, I said, those are the 3. Now, I think he looked to see about some other stuff after he had his experience to kind of get a sense of other people that had had similar experiences. But he didn't, he said, read 3 books up to that point in time, 3 welding books. He said, I'm going to be writing books. He wrote 10 books, 6 of which got published. There's 4 manuscripts that his widow has. Number 2, he said, psychiatrists and psychologists are going to seek me out and ask me to teach them what I've seen. And they or their successors will eventually change psychiatry and psychology from a mental illness profession to a mental health profession that truly awakens the mental well-being, the mental health that is inside every soul on earth. It can't be affected by genes. It can't be affected by anything else other than the power of thought. It's pure. It can't be scratched. It can't be broken. Never broken, nothing lacking. It only will appear that way because of the people's understanding, spiritual and psychological understanding. Now, he didn't involve all that, but he did say those people that come to me, they or their successors will change the field from a mental illness field to a mental health field. And then he said to his wife, you and I are going to be traveling. I'm going to be asked to speak at colleges and universities, not only throughout Canada, but eventually in the United States. In fact, I wrote letters to get he and Chip Chipman and Jan and Elsie and to be able to come to get green cards or whatever it was to come to the United States in 1985. He said, I'm going to be eventually even asked to go to Europe and speak. All of which came true. And he knew that immediately after this experience. So I realized, it wasn't that I believed it, but I was open to learning. And as I started talking to people, I started seeing that I and everybody else was perfectly mentally healthy, but for our lack of understanding of the power of thought. Not the little thoughts that we make up with the power of thought. I saw the other day, I've seen just in the last 10 days at a new level, that Bill Pettit is not this body. It's not who I am. I've said it before, but I saw it. I'm a formless energy that some people would call divine, and I'm with it and it's with me. And it's allowing me to breathe, and my body, it gives life to my body. It also gives me this incredible gift to be able to create thoughts and pay attention to them and to store them in this laptop computer that little laptop that I can carry around, this little MacBook Air called my brain. And I can pay attention or not to the personal thoughts that I have. Now, a lot of people think, and you see people badmouth the personal intellect, not Sid. Sid said a personal intellect is an incredibly beautiful gift. It's what allows doctors to learn and store medicine. It's what allows teachers to, whatever they teach, whether they're physicists or chemists or high school teachers or grade school teachers to store a tremendous amount of information. Lawyers to store information about law. But if that information is not used in synchrony with the divine mind or universal mind or impersonal mind or whatever you want to call it, then chaos reigns. There's been some brilliant people that have gotten control of countries and murdered millions and millions of people because they were brilliant intellectually and they were not aware that they had divine wisdom that was trying to guide them every single moment of their life, if they would just get present enough to hear it. And I'm going to stop here pretty soon, but one of the things I love is that Sid speaks to the simplicity of things. And in preparation for my course on Wednesday, I've been listening to the Great Illusion, which is the first of the Long Beach lectures. And I've been usually having about 9 slides. I'm covering 4 minutes of the Great Illusion, which is 33 minutes. So covering 4 minutes and 5 seconds about, and I usually have about 9 slides from those 4 minutes.
Oh my.
I have listened to the Great Illusion, I'll bet at least 50 times. I am seeing things that I would have sworn you were not on that video. I've never seen them before.
Yeah.
I'm going to share. I love this statement. It was in italics and whatever. It's just beautiful. It's kind of like a poetry, but our thoughts are like, and just, I ask people to just let this whole session be like 80,000 units of penicillin G. Don't think that you're going to see anything new during this session. Just let it go in, and you might wake up 24, 48, 72, 96, 3 weeks from now. You may wake up and it's finally, the titer has gotten to where you say, holy crap. That old doctor was saying something worthwhile. Our thoughts are like psychological threads. I never saw this, that weave our entire experience here on earth. Weave your thoughts with love and respect for your fellow man, and you will weave a blanket of love and understanding for everyone. In simplicity lies the answers to all complexity. What is already known to us appears quite simple. What is unknown to us often appears complicated until it is known, and then it becomes simple. Look for simplicity and forget the already known. Wow, I never heard that. When the answers are complicated, it is the intellect. When the answers are simple, it is the spirit. Last one. True wisdom is not discovered, but uncovered. It's already there. From an uncontaminated innate intelligence, wisdom lies beyond our delusionary ego and our personal thought system. Believe me, words do not convey the magnificence of the hidden treasures that lie within every human being. And if anybody thinks they're the exception, I got bad news for you. You don't get to be special. Everybody's got it. So I'll stop there.
There's so much there. Wow. Wow, thank you for reading that. While people are coming up with questions, I have one.
Sure.
You know how you have said in other webinars, Bill, that you were never taught mental health. You only taught mental illness in medical school. I mean, that's such a huge statement that you learn mental health from someone with a 6th or 9th grade. I think Sid had a 9th grade education because it's not an intellectual process.
You know, in last week's reading from the Enlightened Gardener Revisited, and I don't really remember that either, but he says to the psychologist, he says, why is it that you had no training in mental health? That seems unusual. And they said, we're not sure. All we were taught was that the boogeyman was our genes and our past traumas, and that created the mental illness in us. Nobody told us anything about that we had innate mental well-being inside of us that was untouchable, unscratchable. And I had probably 900 lectures on mental illness and medications to try to treat it. That's how many lectures I had in 5 years of residency on mental health. And it's not these 3 fingers. It's this big 0. 0. Now, here's the deal. People were innocent. They're teaching what they saw. I mean, when people used to do leeches and do whatever, that was the level of understanding. And sadly, that level of understanding, in a way, or maybe, you know, I don't know if people know Thomas Kuhn, who wrote The Structure of Scientific Revolution. It's a little blue book, which I won't get out and bother you with, but he said that every time there's been a major scientific revolution, it has taken 2 things that have to happen. One is the present paradigm, the set of assumptions and beliefs in the present paradigm of any science, whatever it is, it has to be in crisis, meaning it has to not be answering some questions. And it means there's things that can't be answered and problems that can't be answered by that paradigm. But even if that is the case, even if with growing evidence of that, it will never be replaced until there is a paradigm that can answer those questions. So right now, for instance, in 1 year ago, in October of 2020, a year and 3 or 4 months now, there was an article on the front of, and I usually have it sitting around here, but it doesn't matter. On the front of the American Journal of Psychiatry, there was a survey of 2,084 American psychiatrists who, gosh, my heart, they filled out the survey. It's a survey on burnout and mental well-being, and 78% of the American psychiatrists met criteria for burnout: spiritual, psychological, physiological burnout. Now, these are the people that people are going to try to get some understanding, to live through the uncertainty of the pandemic or the losses of the people that died that were friends or relatives. And 78% admitted, the ones that filled it out, admitted that they were burned out. I mean, and I don't mean to say this lightly or because I know those people are, God, I was one of them. I was one of them. They want to be at peace as much as any other human being wants to be at peace. They didn't go into this profession without wanting then to be a healer. They want to be a healer. They went to medical school first, and then they decided to specialize in this area of psychological healing. Nobody mentioned spiritual healing. That's the chaplain's job. But without the spiritual understanding, people are left to their analytical thinking to try to figure it out. To lighten it up a little bit, some of you have heard me say this. There was a movie, and I'm going to be 80 years old here in about 4 months, so some of you might not remember it, but there was a movie called The Sleeper, and I always block on his name. It's a Jewish
Woody
movie.
Allen. Yeah.
Woody Allen woke up After 25 years of being asleep in the movie, he wakes up and he realizes he's been asleep for 25 years. And his first words are, hell, 25 years. I could have been halfway through my analysis.
Yeah, I love that. Oh,
Because, folks, analytical thinking is good. It's good if you have a formula and you know all the variables. If I have to get to the airport at a certain time, I know what time of day it is. I know how long it takes to get to the airport at that time. I know how early before the flight I need to be there. And then I add 30 minutes for an accident. And I've got a pretty good chance of making it to my flight. If I'm wealthy enough, which I never was, but if somebody was wealthy enough in their 30s to say, you know, I'd like to retire at 53 with the equivalent of $umpteen-thousand a year and current in considering inflation over the last, you can go to a bank and they would fit that into a formula, and somebody that's really good with could do it themselves with the formulas and figure out what you needed to put away every year. But at least 96 to 98% of life is not lend itself to analysis. Parenting doesn't. Intimate relationships don't. It's real simple. I'm either in my life or I'm in my thoughts. One or the other. That's what my late wife, Sue, said to me when we were in Coral Gables one day, Lori. She looked at me and she said, gosh, this is really simple, isn't it? And it wasn't simple for me at the time. So she saw it so deeper and so much quicker than I did. And I said, what do you mean simple? She said, well, I see it's really simple. Every human being is either moment to moment in their life or they're in their thoughts. Can't be one place or the other. If you watch children playing, it's not that they're not thinking, but they're not in their thoughts. They're in their life. A lot of musicians and athletes that compete at a high level or play, they don't know that the wonderful feelings they get are from being totally present. They think it's from playing the music or playing the football. So when they can't do it anymore, they try to find it in drugs. So many of them, because they're looking for a feeling that they used to get very simply by being totally present in where they were. And you don't have to be a world-class athlete or a world-class musician. All you have to do is to show up for your life at the same time it's going on. And I'll take a break again for questions, but recently somebody asked me on some webinar or course, they said, Dr. Pettit, this is all fine, but what do you do when you're in the midst of a thought thunderstorm? Anybody besides me ever had a thought thunderstorm? And you know what? Rather than to say some platitude, I went to not knowing to see what came to me. And I found my lips starting to move, and it sounds silly, I wasn't really sure what was going to come out of them. But what came out from a place inside of me was, I said, you know, when I have a thought thunderstorm, I do the best that I can to be where I am. It's that simple. I do the best that I can to be where I am. And that's without judgment. Let's say I do the best that I can, and the best that I can is a 1.5 out of 10. Well, the next thing my brain is going to say is, well, great teacher of the 3 principles is a 1.5 out of 10. I wonder if I can get that on TikTok or Instagram so that other people know about it. I don't care. I just know that I'm going to be the best 1.5 I can possibly be at this moment. And you know what happens? Before I know it, I'm at a 2.5. And then I'm going to be the best 2. Oh, wait, I'm at 3.5. Before I know it, the power of just being present as best as you can be. Sid says the now is like light that brings light to darkness. And no personal thought system can survive the present. Can't. It can't. It's like darkness. It can't survive in light. If you have a clear intention to do the best you can to be where you are, show up for your life. I used to teach this. I used to teach it. To me, it was my level at the time. I'd say, well, you have to quiet your mind and then you'll get present. No, bullshit. I was using my fast and furious personal intellect to try to slow down my fast and furious. No, you can't do that. But if I do the best I can to get present in my life, it will create a crack, if you will, that will let the light in. And once the light gets in, your mind goes from fast and furious to calm and curious. I've probably mentioned this before, but I love the song by Leonard Cohen. It's called The Anthem.
Yeah.
And if you go to Google, that's got 2 versions. One is just he and his band performing it, and the other one has this incredible video with it, with these squadrons of geese and different birds flying in formation, which I love. They're incredible, almost touching wings. And the chorus is, everything has a crack in it. That's how the light gets in. And I heard that, and it was beautiful. It's a beautiful song. But something, I thought of George Pransky's chapters in the Relationship Handbook. I said, no, that's a myth. That's not, or at least not, it's not a full truth. It has a grain of truth, but it's not the full truth. And I went to my analytical thinking. I didn't get anything in about 30 seconds. So I wasn't going to spend, I said, wait, maybe I'll try this 25 years like Woody Allen. And I said, no, I think not. I think I'll stop after 25 seconds. And I went to sleep I got back in my life, and I went to sleep that night, and I woke up the next morning, and of course it was right there. I said, shit, that's it. Everything has a crack in it. That's how the light gets out. Because the light is coming through us, folks. It's another metaphor for life, and it's intelligent. So I'll stop there.
I love that line. Tom has a question. Yeah, it's such a great line from Leonard Cohen. Tom, what's your question?
Yeah. Hi, Bill.
Hi, Tom.
Oh, this is so wonderful.
Where are you, Tom? Can I ask?
Yeah. I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Okie dokie.
Yeah. Do you know your question about the thunder thought storm? The thing that has been so helpful to me is what happened, and I don't even know when this happened, but it happened sometime in the last 3 years when I was introduced to this. Is I began to see that, as uncomfortable as it is, it really wasn't hurting me. And it became like a conviction. It's like, yes, this sucks, but I just know it's not hurting me, like in any meaningful way. And so that has been that's one of the most simplest ways to put it as to what this has done for me. That is just blows my mind that I can see that and count on it. I can count on it. So
Oh, that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
yeah.
I would be open to the possibility that there'll come a day when it doesn't even suck.
Yeah. It's already happening.
Yeah, it's just really cool. It's just that's what you're, some people, and I have trouble, well, got to be careful here, but some people say, well, that's what minds do. No, that's not what minds do. That's what brains do. What you do with your mind, your personal mind, there's only one mind, first of all. There's the mind, the divine mind, impersonal mind.
Right.
We get to use that, like there's only one main computer. We get to use that power source to be alive and to think and to retrieve thoughts, etc. So that's what some people with varying levels of understanding, how they use the personal power of mind in a healthy or an unhealthy way. But that's not what minds do. Brains work pretty like a machine. Like he says, they're biological. And a lot of our thoughts are not even conscious. Let's say that, I know Lori best here. If Lori, the first time I meet her, or let's say I was coming on this today and I hadn't known her since 1985, and I suddenly see Lori, and unbeknownst to me, suddenly I have tears in my eyes and my stomach's growling, and a couple of tears are watering down my cheek, and I'm like, what the hell? I just met Lori, and then I realize, as I stay quiet, wow, she reminds me of the good friend I had in junior year of high school that was killed in a motor vehicle accident. She's a spitting image of maybe what she would look like as an adult. Well, that's not a conscious thought, but people say, sometimes they say, well, how do I control my unconscious thoughts? You don't have to.
I know.
All you have to do is to live in the moment, be aware of your feeling level. And if your feeling level goes south, it's not the time to try to go to analysis. It's the time to just get present, be present, your mind will quiet. And sometimes you'll see what it was, and sometimes you won't. So somebody please mute yourself. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, that's
But
beautiful.
yeah. So
Yeah.
got a question, huh?
Great, wonderful. Yeah. Greg, it looks like Greg, you have a question.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Lori.
Where are
Hey,
you,
Dr.
Greg?
Pettit. I'm in Mississauga, Canada,
Okay,
just next to Toronto.
Toronto. Okay.
Yeah.
I went to the Shakespeare place
Oh, in
outside of-
Stratford, yeah.
Oh gosh, that's one. We saw 5 plays in 3 days, I think. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, I've been there once for I think King Lear. I saw there.
Oh well.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned earlier Billy Hutcherson. I was on a webinar earlier today with him speaking. So, and he mentioned your name.
Wow.
So serendipitous that I get to see both of you in the same day. It's great.
Billy, and he doesn't hide that. Billy is like 10 years older than me, and I'm 79.
Wow.
And
Yeah,
he played competitive tennis until just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, amazing.
And he looks, doesn't he look? He looks maybe.
But it looks great. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
He sounds great. He was full of wisdom today, I'll tell you.
Oh gosh, we've been friends since that day we sat next to each other on April Fool's Day in 1983. Yeah.
Cool.
Go ahead. Yeah.
The thing I want to ask you, I've heard, I think it's from Jan and Chip talking about Sid commenting every time he drank a cup of tea, it was the best cup of tea he ever had. And it occurred to me the other day when I was thinking about it, and you just talked about being totally present.
Yeah.
That it kind of aligned for me, that like my impression of it is that is Sid trying to teach us about being present. That if you're truly present with your cup of tea and you feel the handle of the cup and the rim on your lips and the heat and the scent, how could it not be the best cup of tea you ever had?
There is something, yeah, there's something rich and that you bring up something that I think people forget, that Sid used to say there's an infinite number of doors of understanding, infinite number of doors of levels of consciousness. Well, you could think about that and say, God, that's depressing. Or you could just be excited out of your mind that, wow, it never ends. And I will tell you, it never ends. I've learned more, seen more in the last 6 months than I never saw before. Then I go, holy crap. Now, my first thought is, why didn't I see it before? And then my second thought is one of gratitude, because gratitude is the feeling that will always take you forward. It'll always take you forward. But that's a beautiful story.
I've only
Yeah.
been looking this way for about a year now, but I find the same, like I can go back and re-listen to something I've listened to many times. And the conclusion I've come to is primarily because I'm not the same person I was when I heard it the last time.
Yeah. You got different eyes and different ears.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would encourage people to do is be gentle with yourself. I've got a fellow in Europe and who I talked to the first time in 3 years because of some travel things. And he said, Doc, he's probably in his mid-20s, you know. He said, Doc, I still do stupid shit. And then I just say, gosh, do I really, have I seen anything of the principles? I said, you know, I've been exploring the principles for 39 years. And I will tell you, at least, I won't admit to a whole lot over the last few years, but 20 years, I was still doing stupid shit. I wasn't doing it as often. What I did wasn't quite as stupid and wasn't quite as shitty. So I kept moving in the right direction. And the more I had gratitude for instead of beating the shit out of myself, the more I had gratitude for the direction I was going, the faster I moved. So I encourage people, and there's nothing wrong with saying I'm sorry, or if you really goof up, you might ruin something. But listen, every moment of my life to me is a second chance. It's a second chance. If I just burnt the cookie, I can't unburn the damn cookies. I can make a new batch, given what I've learned about the temperature and stuff. So I'm less likely to burn the next batch. So I would encourage everybody as you move along. It's wonderful, you know, to how many people, raise your hands if you will, have heard me tell the story about the 91-year-old man that came to the group? Nobody? Well, I'll tell it quickly then. Is it okay, Laura?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So after I left, after where Lori was, we met at the Advanced Human Studies Institute in Coral Gables, Florida. I went into private practice in Bradenton, Florida. And we had a adult unit in the basement, and then we had a geriatric unit up on the third floor. And so I did a group 4 days a week, except Fridays when I usually had a lot of discharges and stuff. And so we'd take the adults from the downstairs unit that were able to up to the geriatric unit. And so one of the first people in their 80s, he said to me before the group started, it was about 50 minutes. He said, I have a friend visiting me today. Is it okay if he sits in the group? Okay. I said, of course. So I do this. This is 1985 now. There's no videos. There's no books written by Sid. It was Sanity, Insanity, and Common Sense, which I think had 4 principles was in it. But because it was written by people that didn't really understand what Sid was saying, and they were good people. They were friends of mine. But anyway, so I did this 50-minute group. And afterwards, a couple of people came up to ask questions or share something. And I noticed this man standing off to the side, and he had tears quietly trickling down both his cheeks. And when they left, he came up to me and he said, Dr. Pettit, he said, I'm 91 years old. He said, I just learned more about life in the last 50 minutes than I learned in the first 91 years of living. My hair stood up standing up on my arms right now. And he said, because I think if we voted, we would most say, oh God, he's just so sad that he didn't hear this earlier. Wrong answer, as Robin Williams would say. The tears were coming down. He said, these tears streaming down my cheeks. He said, they're not tears of sadness. They are tears of incredible gratitude that I heard this while I'm still alive. And then he said, the remarkable, he said, now, do I wish that I would have seen it when I was younger, like 81? That's what he said. I think he went down as far as 71, or incredible 71. Of course, but more than anything, I am grateful. And I just wanted to say thank you. Now, if I would have been slowed down and not so busy in my head and in my work, I would have gotten some content, can I take your name? Can I take your phone? We didn't have cell phones back then, but can I call you? No, I never saw him again. I never saw him again. He said, I just wanted to say thank you. Wow. Incredible. Now, some people, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Bill.
No, some people now their brains are saying, see, he heard it in 50 minutes. How come you haven't heard it? Maybe you're really something wrong with you. Yeah, thank your brain for sharing its comments.
Well, you have such great stories, and maybe we have time for one more question. I don't know if you do.
Sure, I do. Yeah.
But before we do the question, in case people have to leave, I just want to say that Bill has these online courses. One is, what's the next one you have coming up? I really encourage everybody to take at least one of these courses. They're incredible.
Well, the first one was called the Mind-Body Connection. And because it's been and I think it's valuable, and it's not about blaming yourself, but it's about being aware that the body is trying to let you know. I have itching when I start going too fast or whatever. I have Caladril but I put the little Caladril on, but I also acknowledge I need to slow down. I'm going too fast. So your body, your stomach, your brain, your skin, so that's the mind-body connection. The next one was on, and all of them use Sid Banks's material. They use Sid Banks's material as backdrop. So the next one, we went through the missing link, and I had 4 men of color and 4 women be my co-hosts. And over an 8-week, 12-week period. And so that's on the missing link. And then the last 2 were awakened because of this article on the psychiatrists. And so I did it, and physicians are burning out, nurses are burning out tremendously, and you can understand it, but I will tell you, there's some that aren't burning out. Those are the people that we should be asking, how come you're not burned out when you're doing the same thing? Instead, we look at the ones that do burn out. And so I did this course called Helping the Helpers. Hope for the Helpers, I guess that was it. Less stress, more joy. And then that was the Enlightened Gardener we went through. And this one is called the Thriving Together. And this is about going through the Enlightened Gardener Revisited. Corey Keyes, the researcher for positive psychology, has a survey, and it's just a survey, but it's been used across the United States, across cultures, education, colors, religions, and about 18% of the people come out as thriving. 18%. 50% come out as okay, but stressed. I'm okay. As long as I do my yoga, my qigong, my mindfulness, and get my hour of exercise in. Now, nothing wrong with any of those 4 things. But if that's what's holding me together rather than enriching my life, there's more. There's more to learn. And it's not about judgment. It's just knowing that there's more. And then 32% of people are languishing, which means they're waking up every day overwhelmed. And the bottom part of those are waking up every day, deciding whether or not to kill themselves. And if they decide to kill themselves, deciding whether they're going to kill other people before they take their own life. And we read about it in the paper every day. And your heart aches for them and for everybody that's affected, because these are good people who want to be loving and peaceful just as much as anybody on this call.
So true, so true.
So that's the courses on my website. Our website. I have I've launched a new channel, YouTube channel. If I get so many subscribers, right, maybe it'll help me during the period I'm going to be writing. But it's called William F. Pettit Jr. MD. It's a new YouTube channel, and we're putting up new YouTubes on there every day.
Oh, wonderful. William F. Pettit,
Jr. MD.
MD.
Yeah.
William F. Pettit Jr. MD.
Right. That's the YouTube channel. Yeah.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Hey,
And there's that whole series from Elizabeth Alovius is on there that I did with her, and we just did 4 recently on neurodiversity, on Asperger's and autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. And then the second one had people that talked about their experience before and after the principles. So it's valuable. It's and the first one was called One Cause, One Cure. And then there were stories of hope from anxiety disorders, stories of hope from depressive disorders, stories of hope from addictive disorders, stories of hope from trauma disorders, stories of hope from psychotic disorders, schizophrenia and psychosis, stories of hope, because I have seen in the last 40 years, every diagnosis that you can think of, I would say, turned around, because it's not, the label describes where a person is. It has 0.0 to do with who a person is. Big difference.
I remember Sid saying, in the future, there will be one diagnosis, the misuse of the ability to think.
Well, and that's what triggered our article, Lori, is then I said, I interrupted you. I apologize. No, go ahead. What the inability to what? What did he say?
That there will be one diagnosis in the future, the misuse of the ability to think.
Right. So that you can imagine how excited I was in September of 2018 when I read All for One, One for All, Mental Disorders in One Dimension. And I called Tom Kelly up the next morning and I said, Tom, we have to write an article. And eventually I got Tom and then Jack Pransky and Judy Sedgman, and we wrote it. We worked on it for 22 months. If you go to my website, you can just click on it and then you can type it out. You can copy it and print it if you want to. One generic mental illness. It was in the Spiritual Psychology and Counseling, June of 2021. One generic mental illness, a principle-based psychospiritual explanation of general factor P, which is what they said was behind, and its application to spiritually informed clinical practice. You asked what my next course was going to be. I'm not going to do anything until, in May, I go to Scandinavia, to Denmark, Oslo, and to Stockholm, and then to Manchester, and then to the conference in London. And when I come home in July 1st, I'm going to start writing for 3 years. I think there's 3 books: the early years, the middle years, the late years, because I was in 9 different settings. But the next course that I'm going to do is going to be probably 8-session 6 or 8, probably an eight session course. And I'll have 2 of them. First and the last one will just be me. But then the second and third will be with me and Tom Kelly. 4th and 5th will be me and Judy Sedgman. 6th and 7th will be me and Jack Pransky, who my core authors are this. And you say, why would I want to learn about an academic article like that? Because Pure is full of Sid quotes. And it's about, there's people, when you go to a business or you go to a mental health organization or you go to nurses in a hospital, if you really can answer, if you can give them this article and say, I can answer any question you have about this, and you'll be able to do that after you take the course. And you can always be in touch with me. But so that's my next course, and that'll probably be probably in November of this year.
Wonderful. Ah.
Yeah.
All right, there's a hand up. We got
Okay.
one more question, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Kevin.
Is that for me? Great.
Where are you, Kevin?
Hey,
Where
how
are
are
you?
you? Nice to meet you.
Hi.
I'm 20 minutes southwest of Laurie.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I'm in Connecticut.
Okay.
And
You know, I was at
you
the
talk-
submarine base there, so I
Yep.
used to run 10-kilometer races all around Connecticut there.
Yeah,
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm actually in New Britain, so you know that where
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah.
And you talk about how you don't plan your life. I started, I was seeing different psychologists, and they're like, "Oh, you have a major depression," and I did all their stuff. It's just that I get lightheaded, dizzy, fatigued, and I pass out. Nobody can tell me what's going on. And then all of a sudden, I started doing EPA just to get some help. There were 3 people that I called, and only Lori called me back, and that got me hooked up to a long-term training with Jack Pransky. Actually, funny, it ended up being in my living room, so I didn't even have to travel. And one of the things, and working with George Carver just recently after all of this, he's somewhere in California, that we found out that I just get caught up in my thinking. That's your
Gosh,
thought thunderstorm.
I've never heard of that before, Kevin. You get caught up in your thing. Well, that's remarkable. That's
Yeah,
the first time I've ever heard that, I think.
I can quote that. Wow,
Okay.
Kevin has a quote.
'Cause I lived there for 41 years, so I know what you're
Exactly.
talking about. Okay.
Well, we all
Yeah.
do. And actually, I tend to be sarcastic, and it took me a couple seconds to catch on to that. And it goes back to a tape because I helped put some of George Pransky's tapes on DVDs for Lori, and then of course I just sat and listened to them, and I'm like, my God, just the information that I got from just doing that. And he talked about catching your negative thought and then trying to release it, and then that's you all caught up in your thinking. And that also goes out to, I don't know if we talk about this, in it, but I've also heard the Indian proverb of the young brave who goes to the chief, and the chief says, "You have 2 wolves inside of you, the good wolf and the bad wolf." And the brave says, "Well, how do I know which one I have?" And the chief says, "The one you feed." So if you get those
You know
negative,
that's in The Quest of the Pearl in Sid's
I
book?
do not know.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
He has-
that's a new book
he
for
has
me.
He has that in that story in The Quest of the Pearl.
Yeah, I've heard that outside of the 3 principles,
Right.
and it's just because if you can catch that negative thought and don't feed it, what's going to happen is another thought's going to come in. And I did this one test of writing down all my thoughts for a day, and after doing a page and a half, I looked at it and I'm like, there's not one positive thought there. So I'm like, I'm just getting negative thoughts all the time. until, and then with all of this and getting caught up.
Kevin,
in
do you have I'm going to ask you because of time.
Yeah.
You have a question.
Yeah. What do you think is another good way, or, to just your wisdom on how we can catch these thoughts?
I don't know if you're
Or
going to
become-
like that. I don't know if you're gonna like it.
Doesn't
Kevin,
matter. It's your
the
wisdom.
last thing in the world I would do is to try to catch my thoughts. I don't care what my thoughts do. It's irrelevant to my life. And
That's actually a great answer.
Can you repeat that again, Bill? That was such a
Pardon
great
me?
answer.
That's a
Well,
great
I think
answer.
George would be the first one to admit that and George would say this, that he had difficulty seeing the spiritual. So he taught it cognitively. And he did. And the last thing in the world that I would do is try to do anything with my thinking. I just wouldn't do that. Because I know that what I am is spiritual energy, is formless energy. And it's interesting, even in the research, they didn't know what to do with this, because the cognitive therapy goal is to change your thinking and to lessen your negative thinking, correct? If
Yes.
anybody loses me, tell me. So in Siegel's book, they got 100 people who had recovered from their depression through cognitive behavior therapy. And after 2 years, they had no relapses. And then they had another group of 100 people that had gotten recovery from their depression through cognitive behavior therapy, trying to work with their thinking and stop catastrophizing and stop doing this and nipping it in the bud and doing all this. And they had all relapsed within 2 years. So the researchers thought, well, this is a chance to prove cognitive behavior theory, because obviously these people are going to have much more negative thinking than the people that didn't relapse, right?
Mhm.
So they gave them all these scales, and they found, to their utter at first chagrin and surprise, that there was absolutely no difference between the amount of negative thinking that the people were having that didn't relapse and the people that did relapse. So what's the question that comes up? Well, what was the difference then, right? Right?
Exactly.
Well, the different in the non-3 principles community, they saw something, but they didn't know what to make of it. If you don't know the principles behind life, then you have to make something up with your intellect. And there's good, better, and best. So what they saw was the people that didn't relapse, they didn't care whether they had negative thoughts. It was irrelevant. They knew any thought that lowered their feeling level was not of their interest. They didn't need to do anything with it. They had what they had decentered from the content of their thinking. So then what did they do? They said, well, we don't want to challenge Aaron Beck, but we need to find a way to help people decenter from the content of their thinking. They consulted with Barbara Lenehan, who is the founder of dialectical behavior therapy, and her Trappist monk spiritual teacher. And so they came up with mindfulness meditation to let the thoughts. And so even without an understanding of the system, some people, if they did their mindfulness meditation every day, they started to get some relief, even though they didn't understand the principles. They got some relief from their thing. Now, here's the deal, and God love him, he's so humble. Dickon Bettinger, where I went in and out of depression for 21 years, he went in and out of severe anxiety. But he said, before I learned the principles, I did up to 4 hours a day of mindfulness type meditation in order to control my level of anxiety that I was creating because of my lack of understanding of the system.
People won't believe you, Bill, but I heard Dickens say that 4 hours of meditation a day.
Yeah, that's what was holding me together, he says. So here, I'd like to kind of end with this, and then I'll take I'll take another 5 minutes. But this is a little book called My Guide Inside, and it's done by Krista Kamsel from Canada, Salt Spring, and it was an educator, and knew she and her husband Bob had known Sid since 1975, and Kathy Marshall Emerson, who's at the University of Minnesota, and she's the director of the National Resilience Center. And I say this at the same time, I know there's iHeart, I know there's Spark, and I know there's Annie Poole's program, and this just happens to be the one I know. I have on my list to quiet down enough to learn the others. I don't know them, but I'm gonna tell you the first 4 lessons. This is for first graders, 1st through 4th graders. And then there's another one, a teacher and a student manual for 5th through 8th and 9th through 12th. And I'm gonna read the little blue thing here. That's all I'm gonna read for the first 4 lessons. And you tell me if all the adults in the world learned these first 4 lessons for first graders, if the world would not change within 30 days, maximum. If I would have learned these first 4 lessons, which I did not get any of them in 26 and a half years of formal education, including 5 years of residency in psychiatry, or imagine that we're all first graders and the teacher said this first week in lesson number 1, we're going to learn something new. We're going to learn that you have a guide inside. It's wisdom and common sense. And everyone has this guide inside. Just look for the feeling. You can trust your guide. It points you in the right way. Wow. And then for the week, you do exercises. We did it. We do exercises in first grade and game playing and learn new words. And then the teacher comes up on Monday of the second day and says, boy, last week we discovered you have a guide inside. Get ready to learn that your feelings are created by your thoughts. My thoughts create my feeling. All my feelings come from thought, either conscious or unconscious, doesn't matter. I let my unwanted thought pass by and well-being is present. To me, I just get present and my unwanted thoughts pass by. I don't worry about doing anything with them. Okay, so now nobody told me that. I thought my feelings were created by what my wife just said, or what my kids just did, or what the boss or the guy that gave me the finger driving, or whatever. Number 3, happiness is inside of me. Clouds cover the sun. I know the sun is still there. As the clouds pass by, I know I will see the sun again. My cloudy thoughts pass by. When that happens, I feel happy. It's simple to see. Happiness is inside of me. I listen to my guide inside. Helpful thoughts pop up and happiness is present again. Number 4, I tell people after 39 and a half years, lesson number 4 for first graders, on my good days, I get a B-. And on my bad days, I get a D+. And they say, okay, we're curious. What's lesson number 4 for first graders? I can see that I'm thinking fast and furious. I can choose, it says here to let it go. I would say I can choose to get present. And suddenly I'm calm and curious. If I would have learned these first 4 lessons in first grade, not only would my life have been much gentler, but the many people around me their lives would have been gentler too, just because mine, I would have had much more common sense. So I don't know if there's anything before we stop. And I
Oh,
haven't-
Lori, if I could just say something quick. Bill, that question that I asked, the answer that you didn't think I'd want to hear. Wow, you just gave me a lot of insight onto a lot of things, and that aspect of just unwanted thoughts pass by, and you're in the present and in well-being. Oh, wow, that's
Here's what
that's
I'd say though,
incredible.
Kevin, is to know that I didn't give you any insight. You heard something that triggered the place of insight inside of you, and it's
Right.
coming out and it's yours because there's a wonderful Hebrew saying that words that are spoken directly from the heart reach the heart. And I think also it's similar to you, because I think the truth and the heart are in the same place. And if you hear words that are spoken directly from truth, it will reach the place in your heart where truth lies. And you will then have a realization from the inside where the wisdom is already there. Shall we stop while we're behind? That's what I used to always tell my groups at the end of the time. I said, why don't we stop while we're behind? People always say we're going to stop while you're ahead. But, never mind.
oh my gosh, we could probably go on forever, right? I just want to say one thing though before we end, because Kevin brought up about George's tapes, videotapes. I mean, they were pretty conceptual, but George took them off the market as he became more spiritual, as he saw that there was this spiritual.
I think they may be back on again, but they, at Sid's request, he did take them off for a while. I don't know where they are now, because they just didn't address the spiritual. And it's not that people, that was where he was. And it's not that some people didn't see beyond it and be helped by it. My wife Linda talks about good, better, and best. And good is books, tapes. Better is energy, and best is a direct experience of the divine.
Yeah.
And the more our mind quiets, as Sid says, when your mind becomes tranquil, it's replaced by divine mind. And Einstein knew that. He might not have called it divine mind, but he said, I think 99 times and I get nothing. So I stopped thinking. Now he knows they didn't stop thinking, but I stopped paying attention to my personal mind, basically. So, but what he said was, I think 99 times I get nothing. So I stop thinking and swim in silence. And the truth comes to me. Somebody sent Michael Neal, I turned him on to Thomas Merton, and Michael Neal sent me a thing the other day. He said, I was reading something from Thomas Merton, who was a Trappist monk. He said, Thomas Merton said, God's original language was silence.
Interesting.
Wow.
Sid said truth is everywhere, right? You just have to go look.
Absolutely.
It's everywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the fact that you are so willing to say how much your understanding has grown through the years. The same was true with George, with every one of us. My understanding in the last year is greater than it's been in the previous 30.
Of course.
It's unbelievable how just in this conversation deepens.
That's really hopeful. It's really hopeful, isn't it? As long as we're still breathing and we're still open to it, we're going to see things we didn't see before.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, guys.
Yeah, thank you so very much. This has been really wonderful, and thank you all for coming. And don't forget to look up, and your website is thedoctorspettits.com.
So can I ask Mr. Zhang, where are you? I had a good friend who's Dr. Zhang.
Ah,
He was
actually, it's Zhang.
Say it again. How do you say it?
Zhang.
Zhang?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's my
okay.
last name. Yeah, Zhang.
Are you here in the States or are you in China?
In Taiwan.
In Taiwan. Okay. Okay, wonderful. Welcome. Welcome. So good to have you here. Good.
Oh, yeah, good
Okay.
to see you, Young Soo. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it? I mean, Lori, who would have known when this you know, this welder with the 9th grade education has this powerful experience, and now 48 years later, you know, in the science of the structure of scientific revolutions, it usually takes about 50 years. It takes about 50 years. Well, we're going into year 49. So do you think that it's now there's pockets in at least 45, 50 countries? It's pretty amazing. If we can start sending books to the world, you know, Denmark has written 2 books with over 20 transformational stories in each one. One of them won a big award in Denmark. Well, what if 15 countries sent books to the World Health Organization, to the psychiatry department? At some point, they'd have to say, you know, we need to take about $40 or $50 million and do a 5 to 8 country double-blind studies to see if this really is as good as, right? At some point, they're going to have to do that. So peace on everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
You're
Thank you for
welcome.
being you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
And thank you, Lori.
Yeah, Lori,
Thank
thank you
Thank you,
for the
everybody.
invitation. Yeah.